Our guest on this week's Goalkeepers Union podcast is Cardiff City's Neil Etheridge, representing the Philippines at national team level and going all around English football. Oldham, Fulham, Walsall, Charlton, the list goes on. Neil's got an extraordinary story, which is very, very different to how most goalkeepers have arrived in the Premier League. Neil Etheridge, thanks very much for joining us. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks, guys. Good
Christmas and New Year?
Busy. I guess any football player will say exactly the same thing, to be honest. It's a busy period for us, a lot of games. It's all about resting. It sounds a bit boring, but that's how it is.
What does a goalkeeper want for Christmas?
Well, over the Christmas period, as many clean sheets as possible, to be honest.
I'm sure you've seen on social media as well, Neil, that one lucky Cardiff fan got Neil Etheridge for Christmas. Have you seen this?
Yes. Yes, I have actually. No, I have. It's always nice. I mean, it's always nice to. I mean, it's great to have supporters, obviously, and we're in a very privileged position. So it's nice to always, give back and then do as much as we can.
That's when you know you've truly made it in life. I think when somebody has a cardboard cutout of you. I've ordered my cardboard cutout of Rich. It's still in the post.
There's just lots of holes in it. That's the problem.
Neil,
I bought a few myself, and I'm going to send them out for next year, I think.
Was this available in the club shop, Neil, or has someone actually created this themselves? I'm fascinated to know.
I'm going to go, someone's probably made that one themselves, to be honest.
That is very good perseverance from whoever did that. Neil, let's talk about this season. I think it's fair to say that at the start of the season, a lot of people had written Cardiff off rather unfairly. But actually, this stage of the season, things are looking pretty good. How's the campaign been for you?
Really good, to be fair. We've got a great, atmosphere within the dressing room, within the club. Obviously, people wrote us off before the season in the Premier League, and people wrote us off in the Championship as well, to be honest. I mean, I think we had a great start to the Championship year. We got to Christmas and people wrote us off. We got to maybe 5-6 games towards the end of the season, people wrote us off. So within our dressing room, within the club, the manager, we know what it's like to be written off. So, going into the new campaign this season, it was nothing new for us, to be honest.
And obviously, one of the things that people know about you is the fact that you're the first player from the Philippines to play in the Premier League. How kind of aware were you of how important that was? Because I was reading about your debut, and you debuted in front of 90,000 people for the national team, didn't you? Explain to me how important the Philippines and playing for the national team there has been to you.
Well, it's been an interesting journey, and it's been obviously me playing for the national team before I'd even played league football. It was always a story whenever I went out on loan as a kid. And, playing in front of that amount of people, I mean, that wasn't every international, that was a semi-final of the Southeast Asian Cup, so it was a special occasion, I guess. But playing in front of larger crowds, 10, 15, 20,000 people, before playing league football kind of got me prepared for playing, League 2, League 1 football. With all due respect, you're not playing in front of as many people as I was in international football. So walking out in front of a stage with however many people in League 1, League 2, that didn't really faze me, to be honest.
Neil, I want to talk to you about, you mentioned your journey, and, I was obviously aware of you many years ago. In fact, we shared a coach. You had Kevin Hitchcock as a coach for a period of time, and I remember how highly he spoke about you. But then you've had a bit of an interesting story since, and of course, leaving Fulham, and then I know you weren't with the club for a period of time, and eventually you found your way to Walsall, although a few things happened in between. I'd be keen for you to tell us about that. And I know that you had Neil Cutler as a coach, who I'm guessing you have quite a lot to thank him for where you are now.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it was 2013 when I was released by Fulham. Tough year for me that season. A lot of injuries. I pulled my quad a lot of times. I went out on loan to Crewe Alexandra at the time. Thought I was, going to get a stint in League One. Came back to Fulham injured. Went on the bench at Fulham. Pulled my quad again at half time, and it was just constant injury after injury. I just couldn't get it right. And then that was a season Fulham went down into the Championship, and the Felix McGaffers had taken over, and he basically said, I'm getting rid of all the first team players. And at that time, I was kind of in between the reserves and the first team, and, me being injured, he got rid of me. And then it was tough, I mean, it was being in a Premier League bubble, I used to call it. I still do call it. You don't think that it's ever going to end, and you think the money's going to be the same. And the rest of the footballing world's not like that. You go down to League Two and League One, and they just don't have the finances that Premier League clubs do. And at that time, Fulham were a very established Premier League club. So my wages were nice, they were very comfortable, shall I say. And I was offered a few League One clubs, and I just turned them down due to financial reasons. At that time, I'd made bad decisions personally, and I'd just bought a new house kind of thing. So my mortgage was quite high. They are for football players for the size of the length of our career. And I was looking for the paycheck, basically. So I was turning down clubs. I think I turned down, for top of my head, like Leyton Orient came in, and teams like that in League One at the time. Turned them down, and I was just looking for another Premier League Championship club, and they weren't coming. And I turned down too many, and it kept going. And then all of a sudden I realised the season started. But even before the season started, I think I was training at Charlton with Ben Roberts. And Charlton were in the Championship at the time, and Bob Peters was the manager, and he offered me a contract at Charlton. They were always going to bring someone else in, and it was going to be Stephen Anderson, and they had Nick Pope there at the time as well. And I turned that contract down as well. And all of a sudden I find myself in a situation of having a mortgage to pay with no income. I'm turning down clubs left, right and centre. They're all filling up their squad lists. And I'm left there, and all of a sudden I'm going on trial and just trying to find my feet, really. And I really couldn't find my feet. I was still in that Premier League bubble of, no, someone's going to come and someone's going to match what I was on when I was at Fulham. And it never happened, to be honest. And then from there, I went on to trial. I trialled at Wolves when they were in the Championship. I trialled at Exeter. And teams were just saying, no, we can't take you. I'm really sorry, you're really good, but you've got no experience. Because at that time, I probably only played maybe 10, 15 league games. So I had no experience either, but I always knew for myself that I had the ability to play at league level at least. And it was tough, really, really tough period of time. And I remember I put the house on the market, the house was going to go. Sold obviously everything I kind of had, as in my cars and things like that, and I was prepared to kind of go back to the Philippines initially, and then probably go out and play in Asia, probably go to Thailand or Malaysia just to kickstart my career over in Asia. I got a phone call from an agent, and he said, "Hey, would you like to go to Oldham?" And I said, "Well, what's the situation? I'm not really in a strong position." He goes, "They'll sign you for, I think, 2 months until January. They're offering you 200 quid a week. What do you want to do?" And I said, "You know what? I'll take it." So I took it. At that time, my house had just gone through, so I sold that. I was living with my mate up in Manchester. I couldn't really I didn't have the stability to rent a property or anything like that. So I was sleeping at my mate's house. And I didn't even play, to be honest. I didn't even play. I was sat on the bench behind Paul Rahupka. And Lee Johnson was the manager, and I never really saw a way of getting in. I didn't like it. I wasn't enjoying football at all. I was just kind of going in, and it was tough. I was really, I was in a state of I found it really tough. I'm not going to lie. I found it really tough, and I was probably ready to even sack it in, even being joined to a club. And then I played a Johnson's Paint game. And it went to penalties, all the way to the goalkeeper, as it doesn't ever do. And I missed my penalty, and we get knocked out of the Johnson's Paint semi-final. Lee Johnson wasn't very happy. The club weren't very happy about it. And from there, they brought in another goalkeeper, which I found out about a couple of hours before the loan deadline day. I ended up talking to Ben Roberts again, and Ben Roberts was like, "Yes, I can confirm that they're going to bring in." I think it was Paddy Kenny at the time. I think they was going to bring in Paddy Kenny, and that was a funny story because I went into my car, and the steward at the car park goes, "Hey, have you seen the new goalkeeper?" And I've gone, "Mate, I've been here for 3 weeks. What you on about?" And he's like, no, we're bringing another one in. And I'm like, "Oh, great." So I get on the phone to Ben Roberts and a few other people I knew in the footballing world. And they're like, "Yeah, they're going to bring someone else in." At the time, no one had told me, and I could see the writing on the wall. I was going to be number 3 at League One. It was pointless. I didn't, for me, I didn't see the point of being there at all. Very fortunate in my situation that Stephen Henderson at Charlton had got injured a week before, and they needed a goalkeeper to sit on the bench in the Championship at Charlton. Charlton took me on loan initially, literally a couple of about 20 minutes before the deadline shut off. I head back down to London, and then sat on the bench for Charlton for a couple of games, and then made my debut against Cardiff, funnily enough, on Boxing Day in the Championship. And then for the rest of that season, they signed me on a permanent in January. Charlton did, and after that, I think it was a couple of maybe end of January, the manager changed. And I lost my position. I found myself as third choice back end of the season at Charlton. And then I think, and then it was the same repeat all over again. I went back to the Philippines just for a holiday. I didn't know what to do. I'd fed up with football, to be honest. And then I got a Twitter message, of all things, from Neil Cutler saying, "Hey, do you want to sign for us next season?" And I was like, is this real? Or is this like, it's a really weird story because it's there's no agents involved. There's no, I'd never met Neil before this. He just slid into my DMs, as everyone says now. And he just messaged me, and I flew back. He goes, "When you back from the Philippines?" I came back. I went up to Walsall, met Dean Smith, the manager, met Neil Cutler, and it kind of felt right. After all the mistakes that I'd made, the money wasn't big. The club was fantastic to me, and I knew the situation that they were in. For me, it was a no-brainer. I was like, right, this could be, I'm going to be at a club where I'm going to feel wanted. Mm-hmm. That's what I was longing for, probably my whole career up until that point. And then, kicked on, signed for Walsall, did pre-season and stayed 2 years there. It was a fantastic, fantastic season for me.
Do you know what?
Or 2 seasons.
This is why I love your story, and I'm so pleased you were able to share it. By the way, it's a good job that you were following him back on Twitter, so you're able to send the DM to each other, But do you know what? It just shows you, and this is obviously got a lot of young goalkeepers that listen into this show, and the margins are so fine. To think that you were second choice, third choice, League One, scratching around for a contract within days potentially of flying back to the Philippines, and you never would have graced the Premier League. Like, how much can change, and it's such a story. Listening to that as well, there's very much that catch-22. This is another one for goalkeepers where you need experience to be chosen by a lot of these bigger clubs, but of course a lot won't actually give you that experience. So in order to go out and get those games somewhere, which obviously you weren't able to do in your early years at Fulham, maybe get that loan or two, which would have given you that CV to walk into a lot of these clubs. And then the decision you've got, where I liken it to a game of blackjack, 21, where you might roll a 17, an 18. At what point do you stick? At what point do you twist? And the fact that you kept on going to try and find something a little bit better, but never could. In the end, though, you did end up at Walsall. You mentioned his name already, Neil Cutler, and someone that, for listeners who aren't aware, he is now the goalkeeper coach of Aston Villa, recently West Brom. He's making his way up the goalkeeper coaching ladder. He's well known now in the goalkeeper coaching world for being one of the best out there. What was your experience like with him? Did he bring your game on?
Oh, leaps and bounds, honestly. I mean, it was fantastic. It was, for my first season there were things that I was learning. And it's different. It's very different from being a training ground goalkeeper to being a number one. And I've learned that. I'm still learning that. And I'm still getting to grips with that. I'm sure we'll talk about it later in the show, that I've gone from literally League One to Championship to Premier League in 3 years. And your body from a training ground goalkeeper to being a number one is very different. And I had to learn that very, very quickly. But Neil Cutler was great for me. Mentally, he was great. On the training field, he was extreme into details, which was great for me. Analysed the good, the bad, the indifferent. Even if I had a different opinion with him, we would never fall out about it. He'd take my opinion. I'd listen to what he had to say. We'd go through every single clip on a Monday about the Saturday's game. He took me on leaps and bounds, honestly, and you got a lot to thank him for. And he's done it to other goalkeepers as well. And what I was going to say before is about you saying rolling the dice and the experience. It is tough because, especially for a goalkeeper, it's not like an outfield player. An outfield player, you chuck them on for 20 minutes and get a bit of experience, and you can't do it as a goalkeeper. You have to kind of play 90 minutes. The one who starts 9 times out of the 10 who finishes the game, and that's where Neil Cutler, the likes of Ben Roberts, they kind of they look past the experience. They're like, well, our club's moving in this direction and we want someone to do that. The experience is irrelevant. He's going to gain experience on the job. Is he good enough to do it? And I guess, in a way, Walsall, Dean Smith, Neil Cutler rolled the dice with me. And that first season definitely paid off because we finished third in the league. But yeah, I have so much to thank him for because my game came on leaps and bounds with him, and it's been a fantastic experience working with him, and I'd obviously be very happy to work with him once again.
One of the things I suppose lots of people listening at home will think is that you've had an experience which is totally unique, really, for footballers, especially top-flight footballers. Do you feel that you've gained a certain degree of perspective? Because you think of kind of people like Dele Alli or Paul Pogba, people who are millionaires and superstars in their early 20s, and for people like that, there's kind of no bumps in the road. But for you, I suppose, as a player and as a person, have you gained an additional level of perspective over what some of the other pros in the league might have?
I think I agree with you, but for even the players that you've spoken about, there's definitely going to be bumps in the road. I don't think any professional doing what they do day in, day out, they don't, you look at the likes of Dele Alli, even the Messis and the Ronaldos, they're going to have bumps in the road, whether it be injury or, it may not be to the extent that I've had mine, but to them it's going to be big things. I think what I was able to learn from it all was to kind of go out with no fear. I've been at the bottom of the barrel, so what else am I going to lose? So, I go out into games, I'm like, well, I've been at the bottom, so if I go out and make a mistake, I've been there before, so I can pick myself up. I know I've got it in me to do so. But on the off the field, situation, the scenarios, I believe, and I'd like to believe, the people around me will say that I'm quite a normal human being and quite a humble person. I don't like to. Of course, we're very fortunate to have what we have and what we earn. But I've tried to keep it as simplistic as possible, to be honest, as normal as I can, because it doesn't last forever, and you don't know when it's going to end. And that's for me. I know a lot of people do talk about injuries, but mine was never. I mean, we spoke about me having an injury, but it wasn't really an injury that got me into the situation that I was. It was the decisions that I made, and that can happen to me, and it can happen to anyone. And when I speak to younger professionals, especially at Walsall, I spoke to a lot of the younger lads in the dressing room. They obviously still looked up to me as the number one and everything like that. And I said to them, well, it can be taken away straight away. It can be taken away in a heartbeat. You need to work your socks off. You don't know what's around the corner. It could be a great move to Man United, or you could find yourself out of the team and struggling out of the league or in the lower leagues.
Wise words, certainly for all of our younger goalkeepers listening in. Of course, you did have a very successful 2 years at Walsall. And I actually remember we were talking quite a lot towards the back end of your time at Walsall. Randomly, we bumped into each other at a service station, and it was
excuse me.
Yeah, it was very random, very very random. I remember it was Warwick services. It was on the way back from a game, I think it was.
The glamour of
yeah,
football.
We did. We had a bit of a chat, but I know that you had options at the end of that season, and obviously you made the decision. You did a 2-year contract, and you made the decision to run it down. You obviously didn't sign a new contract at Walsall, and you left on very amicable terms, and you knew that it was going to be a move to the Championship. And at that time, you did have options, and you chose Cardiff, who were by no means at that time one of the top Championship teams, or not certainly considered to be one of the top. And you weren't necessarily going there as guaranteed number one either, if I remember rightly. What made you make the decision to go to Cardiff?
At that time, it's nice I can talk back on it now. I mean, I had a very good first season at Walsall, and a good second season. We didn't finish in the league anywhere near we did in the first year, but personally, on a personal level, I had a very good season. And I had some sniffs, some interest in January. But like you said, I decided to run it down because I enjoyed the club. And that was a learning curve for me as well. I mean, I don't know if many people know, Cardiff were looking at me and Lee Camp in January while I was at Walsall, and the two clubs couldn't come to agreement. And that was a test for me. That was a test. It sounds great, another club in a higher league coming in for you. But I even noticed then my performance dropped a little bit over that January when I was at Walsall, because your mind is not on the game. It was a learning curve for me once again. And I came to a situation where I had two real clubs that were interested. And I don't think it's any surprise. It was been in the papers. So we had Sheffield United, who just got promoted from League One, and Cardiff, who obviously came back in for me in the summer after they failed in January. I did meet the two managers, and I've got nothing against Chris Wilder. I think he's a great manager. You can see what he's doing with that club, and honestly, he's a hard-working guy. I mean, he's come up through the leagues as well. But when I met Neil Warnock, and he's been around the block, let's put it that way, he was black and white. And I've never had that in my footballing career. He said to me, Neil, you bring in Lee Camp. I was like, okay, good. He didn't say, oh, you're my number one. He said, look, Lee Camp's injured. You're going to come in. I don't know if he's going to see the start of the season. So you're going to be my number one. And it's down to you if you keep the shirt. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, you had Lee Camp before, so he is your number one. When the squad numbers get put out, he's your number one. And I guess I was very fortunate that I was able to find my feet in the Championship, because we had such a great start to the season, and I think we've won 5 out of the first 6 games. And for a goalkeeper, that obviously you're allowed to make mistakes because you're winning games, and they're not looked upon as much if you're losing games. So Neil Warnock, when I first met him, he was black and white. He told it how it was, and I just had a really good feeling about it. And I think from previous experiences, I didn't want to go into the unknown. Speaking to my agent at the time, he was like, well, if you don't take Sheffield United and you don't take Cardiff, we're walking into the unknown, and you've been there before. And I was like, I don't fancy the unknown this time. I think I'm just going to, play it safe, sign for one of these two clubs, and work my socks off and see where it takes me. So, as I said, I met Neil Warnock, very happy with how he was, and ended up signing the contract. And, obviously I'm still at the club.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? 'Cause you were talking about those fine margins and those decisions that get made, because obviously I think it was in January of that season, Lee ended up going off to Sunderland on loan, and obviously they went down. And then Cardiff go up. Football is so... It's such fine margins, such split-second decisions. I'm interested in talking about Neil Warnock, though. He's pretty much a legendary figure in British football, and everybody thinks they know what Neil Warnock is like. What's he like to work under? What's it like talking to him as a guy, one-on-one, day-to-day?
You can't cheat him. You can't bluff him, because he's been in the game too long.
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, he's such a... I know he's got this, I'm touching it. I don't want to ruin his reputation. He can lose it, and we've seen it many a times before. But it's for the best. He tells it how it is. He'll give you the respect that you deserve as a player, and if he thinks you can do more, he'll demand it. And I think it's give and take. And I think as a player, that's kind of what you want. If I said to him, look, Gaffer, I'm really, if I look at this weekend, for example, we had the FA Cup weekend and I wasn't involved, and I've played every Premier League game so far this season. And he said to myself and a few other players, hey guys, you've played, 20, 21 Premier League games, you need a rest, and it's like, go enjoy your weekend, have a rest. And some managers won't do that. Some managers expect you to be a machine, and we are only human beings. So I've got a lot of respect for him. He treats you like a normal human being, and his staff are exactly the same. They'll demand what they know they can get out of you, and they won't expect anything that you can't do.
Neil, you said that you went from training ground keeper to number one keeper very quickly, and that to some extent you're still adapting to that now, even at 28 years old. When you went from League One to Championship to Premier League in those 3 seasons that you mentioned, how have you noticed the game has changed in reflect to training, to opposition that you're facing, and match day scenarios that you're experiencing?
It's been been tough. I'm not going to lie. I mean, League One to Championship was a big step. Championship to the Premier League has been a massive, massive step. I think people have different opinions on it. Some people will say it's a bigger step from the League One to the Championship, and people will say it's a bigger step from the Championship to the Premier League. I believe, in my opinion, that the Championship to the Premier League is the bigger step, especially for a goalkeeper. I think that the players think faster. They are faster. They're physically stronger. They seem to be a step ahead all the time, and they can pretty much put the ball where they want to put the ball. And I've looked over my clips, obviously, this season, and there's not many times that the boys in the Premier League don't hit the target. They make you work, even if it's a simple save, or they make you work as a goalkeeper. I think in the Championship, erratic's the wrong word, but they don't hit the target as many times as they do in the Premier League. So you constantly have to be on your toes. Mentally, it's tougher. I know we don't have as many games in the Premier League compared to the Championship. I think in the Championship, you're physically more drained. And in the Premier League, you're definitely mentally more drained after coming off the field. There are many a times this season, especially playing the top six. And obviously, I'm one of those who watches football, and I'm like, oh, the top six. And you have a little bit of a dig at whoever's in goal, or you have a little bit of a comment on someone playing in the Premier League in the top six. But you actually realise when you play up against them how good they are and why they are where they are.
Well, there's a few bits that actually touched on this season, a few bits we want to discuss regarding this season. First and foremost, no goalkeeper now has made more saves than you. I think Joe Hart was just pipping you, I think. But obviously, I think you overtook him by one save when I last checked. Are you happy to be that busy?
But I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, for me, it's just about doing your job, and it's a bit of a, it's an obvious one. It's nice to have these personal records, with the saves, with the penalties, being the first Southeast Asian, first Filipino. But it's all about this team that we've got at Cardiff, and it's ingrained in all of us within that dressing room that it's all about the team, and it's all about us staying in the Premier League. And I believe that's why we are doing as well as we are. And I will stand by that comment in the sense of people wrote us off at the start of the season, and we're going into the new year not bottom and not in the bottom three. So it is nice to have these achievements throughout my first season in the Premier League, but it is all about the bigger picture and us staying in that league.
Neil, there was also the incident against Watford. Now, you were, we'll call it a coming together, shall we? A 50-50 perhaps? I don't know. You might see it as a 70-30. I don't know.
A coming together. That sounds like a meeting.
I think it was definitely not that. But and you were quite vocal after or quite honest, shall we say, in that you said Troy had his reasons. We're all professional athletes. Knowing Troy Deeney to be Troy Deeney, he's also quite vocal himself. He doesn't shy away from a controversial comment, shall we say. Has there been any contact between the two of you since the incident?
No, we haven't spoken. I don't believe that we're going to speak until probably play each other again. It was tough. I mean, looking back at it, at the time, it was... I don't think it was a 50-50 personally. People have their opinions on he's got the right to go for the ball. And yeah, he does have the right to go for the ball. I still think looking at it, even if he was to win that tackle and get there first, he's got a lot to do. And they were 3-0 up at the time. It was a bad tackle. I do believe it was a bad tackle. But that happens. I think, it wasn't a red card. I don't think it was a red card. I mean, as a goalkeeper, people say we're protected too much, and I understand that.
Do you think that's the thing? Do you think goalkeepers are protected too much?
I think there's a perception that we are. I think in scenarios like the Troy Deeney and myself one, I think if that was a player-on-player incident, where a player had nicked the ball in front of Troy and he'd gone in with that sort of force, I think we may have seen a different colour or even a card. It is a hard one. It's a tough one. Obviously, people say we're allowed to use our hands. Obviously, we do get away with certain things. I haven't really seen too many instances, in fairness, this season where I've said that's a sending off. A goalkeeper should have got sent off, or there's been a goal that's allowed that maybe we've been impinged on during a corner or something like that. But it is a tough one. I don't think you can get around with it. And maybe with VAR coming in, things will change and the rules will change slightly again.
I'll just jump in there as well, Neil, because it's one that
he was glaring at us too.
Yeah, do you know what? This what happens on this show is I'm there like sticking up for goalkeepers, and they're just giving the standard cliche comments that you hear from outfielders, as we call them. But that one, do you know what? The one for me is the fact when a goalkeeper's going in head first, it is dangerous. I've still got scars all over me from those challenges throughout my career. I still remember as a 14-year-old, and I've still got scars on my thigh where people are diving in, saying 50-50. It's so different when a goalkeeper's going in head first. And on the protection one, and the classic one, you just touched on it there, Neil, is like it would be a cross, and it doesn't take a lot for a striker to nudge against your arm, and your arm only needs to move a matter of a couple of centimetres, and you're going to drop the ball. And it looks dreadful 100%. When you drop the ball, but it might be the smallest bit of contact, but that has forced you to drop the ball. And so it is a foul. Yeah. And
it is. I mean, and if that is the rule, then that should be the rule, and that's how it should be. You can't, change the rules if that's how the rules are, and that's how the Premier League or the Football League deem it to be. That's the way it should be. I mean, you look at the incident, as you guys brought up, between Troy and myself, and Troy's boot is not so close to the ball, let's put it that way. But to be honest, at the same time, we are in a footballing world where people will say there's too much diving, there's too much, is there enough contact? There's not enough contact. I think there's always going to be debates on it. But, for that situation, there's no hard feelings between me and Troy. No, we haven't spoken, didn't expect to speak after. And he obviously felt he had the right to go for the ball, and that's it really. I think you just got to kind of move on from it.
You mentioned VAR there, Neil. Just quickly, it's going to come in next season in the Premier League. What are your views on VAR and how it's going to be adopted?
I think it'll be very good. I think it's worked well in the World Cup in the summer. I know there were some controversial decisions, but at the end of the day, they are still human decisions. To have a replay on any sort of incident is going to be good. I think it's going to be very good. I think, we've added goal line technology, and people will talk about the Man City-Liverpool game. Would it or would it not have been a goal if we didn't have goal line technology? And I think VAR will help not just the goalkeepers, the players, and I think it will help the referees because I think the referees, they haven't struggled, I would say, but I think it's hard to keep up with the pace of the Premier League, especially, and there's obviously situations of people diving and not, and is it a yellow card when they dive, and is it not a yellow card when they dive? And I think VAR will clear up a lot of those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the World Cup, I mean, it was a bit chaotic, wasn't it, for the first couple of weeks, and then it kind of settled down into a pattern. Obviously, they've been using it in the Cup as well. Let's talk penalties, though. A lot of people have been reading headlines about Neil Etheridge this year. It's going to be about penalties. So you've saved 3. Do you know the unusual fact that links all 3 of your penalty saves?
I heard it. I did hear it. It was about American presidents, isn't it?
You have the unusual honour of having saved 3 penalties from 3 US presidents, from Wilson, from Kennedy, and from Madison as well. It's one of those wonderful little things that crops up in football from time to time.
of all the fit people. No, you know what? With penalties, it's great. I mean, I didn't know that at the time. Who's it who's put it past me? Lingard's put it past me, and Hazard's put it past me. We've given away 5 penalties this season. I'm not sure if that's the most this year, but it's never nice standing in front of the penalty, to be honest.
But it gives you a kind of edge, doesn't it? Because obviously, so for a team like Cardiff, obviously things are going well this season, as we said, but the priority is to get to 40 points or whatever that point mark may be to make sure that you stay up and ensure survival. Penalties at either end are absolutely key moments potentially in your season. So if you're a goalkeeper that, say you get Fulham get a penalty against you, or Huddersfield get a penalty against you, whatever it may be, if they're stepping up and thinking, Neil's already saved 3 this year, that gives you even more of a psychological edge over them.
I don't know if it helps or not, to be honest. I don't know if they'll be like, well, he knows it, so I'm going to change it this time. We were actually talking about it when we played Tottenham, funnily enough. And I was like, Harry Kane usually hits it down to my right, but has he seen them if I made a save penalty last week? Does he change? I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know actually what goes through strikers' minds when they take penalties, if I'm honest. It'd be probably more interesting to see their side of things than our side of things, to be honest.
Well, I'm keen to actually ask you, though, because I mentioned we've got loads of young goalkeepers that listen in, and they'll be facing penalties, I'm sure, this weekend. Now the games are kicking off again. Now the new year's really got underway. So they're facing a penalty taker. What little things do you look at? Do you look at the positioning of the ball? Do you look at the run-up that they take? What type of player they are? Do you have certain ideas in your mind as to where you're going to dive based on what you see?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's different lower league to Premier League. In the Premier League, I do believe they can pretty much put the ball where they want it, you know. I think I've said it before, the biggest advice that I give to the kid definitely is that once you've made your mind up, you go big, go hard into that corner. That's it. Don't second guess yourself. Just dive as big as you can into that corner, because you'll always find, you know, you'll kind of dive to your left, for example, and you won't just get there, and you're like, oh, if I'd gone a little bit more. It's like, well, you know what? I just make that decision and go as big as you can into that corner, and that helps massively.
It's interesting though, Neil. You said before then that it's never nice facing penalties. Do you feel, because a lot of goalkeepers, and Rich will attest to this, like their moment, they see the bright lights, they think, if I save this, I'm going to be a hero, the headlines are going to have my name on it. But you said it's never nice facing penalties. Do you not welcome that?
I don't mind it, but if you look at the 3 that I've saved this year, I think one was first game of the season, 1-0 down at Bournemouth, first game of the Premier League. The second was 94th minute against Newcastle at 0-0. And the third one was 0-0 against Madison away from home at Leicester. I think for me, it was more about the timing and the situation of the game. They weren't nice. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you don't want to face a penalty in your first Premier League game, and like I said, 94th minute, you know, at home against Newcastle, they'd gone down to 10 men. We'd been pretty much dominating that game throughout the 90 minutes, and we could have lost it. And obviously at the weekend, or a couple of weeks ago, we did really well away against Leicester. And then they get a penalty, and if I had conceded that penalty, it's 1-0, and we walk away with no points. And fortunately enough for that game, we were lucky to walk away free.
Now, Neil, let me tell you, we have a lot of female listeners, okay? And we've not been giving them what they want so far. We've had Ben Foster on. We've had Paul Robinson on. That's not what they're after. But finally, we've hit the jackpot here for the female listeners, because we have seen some pics of you doing a bit of underwear modelling. Tell us about that.
It was that was my younger days. My body was much better shape. I think it was that. It was I was endorsing a company, and they say, "Would you do the underwear part of it?" And I said, "Yeah, not a problem." And I've done. That was over in the Philippines, and at that time, there was a lot of commercial work that I was doing. I mean, it wasn't just the underwear. I did stuff for Powerade and other big companies. Most people do, yes, concentrate on the underwear. I do understand, but it was good. I mean, I don't think I'd do it again. But yeah, it was an experience. It was. I mean, people always talk about it. You know, David Beckham's done it and Ronaldo's done it. I don't think I want to compare myself to them, but it's an interesting one. Yeah.
Well, we're slowly putting together the perfect goalkeeper with endorsement deals. We've had Joe Hart on, so we got the hair sorted with the head and shoulders. Got you for the underwear. So if you know any goalkeepers who are endorsing socks, do let us know.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
So last up, Neil, how would you, obviously given your years of experience, the various clubs you've been with and the highs, the lows and everything that you've gone through, how would you sum up goalkeeping to you? In one sentence, ideally, but often it takes a little bit more than that.
I think the moral of my story and what I'd say to everyone else is the belief. You've got to believe in yourself. I mean, it can be a lonely position on the field. You've definitely got to believe in yourself, believe in your ability, and keep going. It's a lot easier said than done. You're going to have good days in the office, you're going to have bad days, and unfortunately, if you decide to become a goalkeeper, any mistake that you make is going to be under a microscope. And mentally, you've got to be strong, and then mentally, you've got to be prepared for what comes with it. And it's a great position to be in, being a goalkeeper. I've enjoyed it ever since I started playing. You can't hide from being a goalkeeper, to be honest. I know you don't get the recognition of scoring goals and stuff like that. And even the penalty save is probably never as big as scoring the last minute winner. But, I love it. I love it. And yeah, for me to be in the position that I am, it was all about just believing in myself and believing in the ability and just staying strong. I mean, you look at how goalkeeping has changed over the years. If someone had probably taken Neuer back, and I'd say Neuer because I believe he was the first of the sweeper keeper. If you took him back 20 years, people would think he's crazy. And all of a sudden now he's turned it around into a situation where, you have to be good with your feet now. Alisson and Kepa, big price tags on those people. Ederson, sweeper keepers. The game's changed, and it will keep evolving. It will keep evolving. You look at people like Ederson. I mean, I just looked at him the other day against Liverpool. I seriously think he could play centre mid in some teams. But it's good, and I think you just got to believe in your ability and keep practicing your weak points, obviously. But don't forget what got you to where you are. And if you're a good shot stopper, people always say, like, oh, he should be good shot stopper because he's in goal. Well, not necessarily, you've seen that in the Premier League. There's some great with their feet and not so good with their hands. So you just got to believe in what you do and just keep focusing and keep moving forward.
Neil, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Cheers, thank you very much.